Wow, this is going to be a difficult video to do. It's going to be a difficult series, but I wanted to do something about um, the frustration that I know a lot of young people are feeling. There's so much political discussion now about socialism and communism versus capitalism, and our universities are making such a mess of teaching kids the virtues of capitalism. And I've said in other videos myself that I'm not a fan of secular religion or any kind of utopia that promises us heaven on earth if we just completely overhaul our economic system. So you kind of know where I stand on these things. And yet, I'll bet you don't know how much sympathy I have with young people who are frustrated. I have been a college teacher. I retired recently, but I did that for about 3 decades. And I have a son who's also recently graduated from college. So I think I understand pretty well what young people are going through. Even at my age, I feel a real, almost a hopelessness. If there's one sin that I fight constantly in myself, it's the sin of despair. I have a lot of trouble thinking that there's any hope for us. And this is kind of, I have so many notes here that I'm just going to sort of read some of these things off, but uh, I imagine myself just looking at, looking for reference points, looking for bearings. The past is dead. The past teaches us nothing, even if we know anything about it, and we're losing our awareness of it really quickly. But say that you had a great grandfather who knew how to put uh, those iron rings around a wagon wheel. That was pretty cool. I mean, that was a pretty highly developed skill. Not just anybody could do that. You had to spend a lot of time practicing how to do it. Well, not only does no one really know how to do that anymore, but why would you want to? Why would you need to? It's gone. There's no need for it. Even things like changing the oil in your car, which your dad probably did, but you probably didn't learn how to do it. Even I have actually done that a couple of times, but I found in later models that you just about couldn't do it because they deliberately put things in such awkward positions that you just have to take your Chevy to the dealership or your Ford to the dealership. You have to have somebody put it up on the rack and have the right tools to do these things. So sometimes we are deliberately distanced from the useful manual things that we might be able to do. It's designed that way by the capitalist system, you could say, to create more jobs and customers for other enterprises. It's hard to find something of the past that you can continue to do and do meaningfully and usefully. So the past is useless. In the future, I talk so much in these videos about the disease, the spiritual disease of adoring the future and placing all of our hope in the future. And I think that is the great illness of our time. But uh, even if we look to the future, hopefully, that if you're an intelligent person, it's difficult to take a lot of hope in that. You find that technology increasingly is taking over the jobs of human beings. Um, your job as a person, as a kid just out of college, you're lucky if you can find a job flipping burgers or delivering pizzas. You may have trained in the STEM uh, and doing something technical, but what even if you're a technician, eventually the technology that you're designing is aiming at, I guess, what they call the singularity point, where artificial intelligence can design its own upgrades, can um, give itself the corrections that it needs, and even improve itself and build the next generations of itself. It doesn't need you. It doesn't need us to do anything but tasks that are so menial that it would be a waste of money to develop robots to do them. So, we have jobs cleaning out toilets or emptying garbage or flipping burgers. And now this is where I shift into talking about capitalism. I'm going to show you, some of you guys, I think that I understand why sympathy for capitalism is waning among the young. So, you get to, if you worked really hard, you get to graduate from flipping burgers to managing the burger bucket. And that creates a substantial pay raise, although you're still kind of a slave because you have to be there 24/7 almost, or be on call. It's managing those things is a really demanding enterprise. But you have more money, so now you can buy a really nice house, which you get to sleep in and do not much more because you're so busy on the job. Or let's say that you're in another management position, you have a little more time. You get the weekends off. So now you can play golf for 3 hours a week, or you can buy a boat and go to the lake, and you can spend Sunday afternoon out there puttering around with your friends and drinking a six-pack. And that's as good as it gets. That's your life, mate. That's what you went to college for. That's what you've been preparing for. You've been all your adolescent years when you were dreaming about what you're going to do in life. That's it. You've arrived. You're the manager of a franchise, and you can afford golf clubs and maybe, buy some nice video games and basically use your little bit of free time to forget what a miserable dead end your life otherwise is. I'm sorry about that. It didn't always used to be that way. As I told my own son, it used to be that you could at least go into your dad's profession, and maybe it was making wagon wheels, but at least it was a hands-on kind of a thing where you got to know members of the community. You got to build strong personal ties. If you worked hard and were honest, your business would improve. It's not like you needed an escape to get away from it to keep your sanity. It was a sort of a slower pace of living, and the human contacts involved were so much richer. So even though you weren't setting the world on fire building barrels or wagons, you were, in a human sense, more rewarded. And I think people who seem to have this infatuation with socialism, the social side of it is part of what appeals to them. Now, I think Karl Marx, I'm going to say something else that may shock you, but I think he was actually right about capitalism's having the seeds of its own destruction. And I can think of several ways in which this is true, some of which he didn't even mention. But certainly capitalism concentrates our values on material possessions. It depends upon consumers wanting stuff. If people don't want stuff, then we don't sell things, we don't produce things. The market goes flat, and all of the money, all of the riches pass out of the system. So we have to have buyers who want lots of stuff. We have to have a materialistic public. I think that's true, and I think that's very disappointing and rather dangerous. This is a slightly different point, but this materialism accustoms people to convenience so that they lose their ability to endure, their ability to sort of touch base with life at the dirt level, to understand what it's really about. I think we're definitely suffering from that right now. Their ability to control themselves morally. This is part of why we're a bunch of wimps and wusses in some ways. This kind of criticism goes back long before Karl Marx. Plato was a great admirer of the pristine Spartan state, which was somewhat mythologized by him, I believe. But the ancients often had this idea. Uh, the Romans had this notion of the Eastern peoples, that they were so pampered by luxury that they were weak in battle, and this kind of idea that success weakens you morally, it weakens your self-control. There's some truth to this. I think capitalism has done this to us. I think this is really a criticism that Marx would never make, but the market, in a spiritual sense, is debilitating too. It creates a kind of what I might call Christmas afternoon phenomenon. When you remember being a kid and you've opened all the presents, and there are a bunch of bows and wrappers lying all over the floor, and you got basically what you wanted, but there's this voice in the back of your head saying, "Is that it? Is this all?" Spiritually, I think capitalism tends to leave us yearning for something that we're never going to get, because after all, it keeps promising us and teasing us through advertising that we can get what we really want, but we're never there. We're no matter how much we get, there's still something more that we didn't get. And if you Alexis de Tocqueville talked about this when he visited America, that the thing that makes America possible is religious faith. If people surrender to the market entirely and don't have that sense of the beyond, then this sort of spiritual sabotage can happen. Now, finally, I would say of capitalism that in criticism that it devours itself. It eats its own. What happens when a business becomes really successful? A number of things that are pretty dirty, pretty disappointing. It destroys free enterprise. It destroys small business competitors. The big businesses will actually lobby, will actually, through the government, promote things like minimum wage and OSHA standards, and they want to have lots and lots of regulation because they have the resources to fulfill the requirements of the regulations. The little businesses, the startup companies, do not. So that's the way that you drive your competitors out of business. And we see this more and more, that the bigger and bigger and bigger corporations just find ways legalistically to stomp their competitors out of existence. Now, here I'm going to pivot, and this is where Marx is disastrously wrong. I'll just pick up on that previous point. Big business loves big government. Big business loves big government. Its connection with big government allows it to have an inexhaustible supply of consumers. Think of Bill Gates marketing a computer system, or some sort of software developer marketing through government. I mean, this is such a great product that we're going to have all the schools, or we're going to have all the military, or everybody's going to be using this. That's, as a business, you love that. And because you're able to drive all your competitors out of business in the way that I've just described, you are forever after just raking in the cash, and there's not even any incentive now to improve your product. That's the thing that is supposed to be, that did make capitalism work so well in the earlier stages while it was working. It's the drive, the incentive to improve, to make a better product than the other guy. Well, now you've squeezed all the other guys out, and you have this unholy alliance with big government. So there's nothing to do but keep reproducing the same old product and raking in the profits. Marx did not foresee, he seemed to think that, okay, the capitalists are all going to kill each other off, they're going to do this circular firing squad, and then the socialist good guys are going to come in and just clean up the battlefield, it's going to be sweetness and light after that. No, it doesn't work that way. The big capitalists always merge with big government, always. Look at the Soviet Union, look at China. This always happens. It's called corporatism. Corporatism is the, I guess you could say, stage 5 of the cancer in capitalist decline. Even if you have certain communist leaders who disdain the materialism that we talked about, and I don't know of I don't honestly know of any communist leader in history who was not fabulously wealthy. Even if he didn't have a personal bank account in Switzerland, he was surrounded by all this royal luxury. Of course, it was so important. It is always so important for the elite that lead the people not to be bothered with little existential worries, so they always live in the lap of luxury. They might as well be stinking rich, even if they're not formally drawing an income. But even if such a person did not lust for money, there's a more evil lust that drives such people, and that's megalomania, the lust for power. And Marx didn't talk about this either, but everybody who craves power turns into a bad person. That's not even a careless generality. That's in every specific case. I've lived 66 years in this life, and every person who craves power eventually turns into a bad person. There's nothing that so corrupts the soul as the libido dominandi, the lust for power. Just read Suetonius's Lives of the Caesars. You don't have to even look at Marx and Mao and Castro and Pol Pot. You can go way back in history. This is how it always works. It doesn't work. And the Marxists will tell you, and this is my third and final point about where Marx went wrong, but their intellectuals will always tell you, look, people learn their values through a kind of brainwashing, a cultural brainwashing. They're conditioned by the culture that they're brought up in. And this is why it's so important for the Marxist to get in control of the media and the educational institutions so that language can be overhauled and ideas can be altered. You can get inside of people's heads and you can substitute a different kind of brainwashing. You got to get them thinking along different lines. Well, but wait, who are you as the revolutionary idealist to carry these high ideals into this transformative society? Where did you get those high ideals? What are you, Moses, having spoken with God? Are you God himself? Because I think that's what most revolutionaries seem to think they are. Where do you, if all values are simply inculcated by cultural conditioning, then where did your values come from? Or maybe you hate your culture, so everything you do is kind of a knee-jerk counter-conformist reaction against your cultural values. But you're still not validating your objectives as of a higher level than anybody else's. You're basically just saying, well, they're mine, and I'm smarter, and I'm better, and dang it, all the rest of you guys, I have the power, and you're going to do what I say because I really want what's good for you, and I may have to shoot some of you before you admit it, but you see, again, I'm actually circling back to the point about megalomania. This makes evil people. When you think that you have, without any sort of metaphysical system, all values just come from cultural conditioning, but somehow yours come from God knows where, and there is no God, so they're just out of thin air because you think it's right, then you're going to take over everyone else's lives and you can make them be happy according to what you think is happiness. That's an evil person. I've just defined, I'm sorry, but I've just defined a really evil, rotten person. I don't want you to fall for people like that. Okay, I'm out of time, but in the subsequent videos to this introductory one, I'm going to try to suggest to you how we don't have to live in a desperate late capitalist society, and that's the only alternative to this disastrous Marxist version. So let's see where we can go from here.